show of hands, were troubled by the president's response to the violence in Charlottesville? None of you minded how President Trump responded.
No.
No.
No. I didn't see anything wrong.
To be fair, there was nothing wrong with what Trump said, even initially. He called out violence on both sides, and then, under probably the behest of his, media agents, he came out and called out white supremacy specifically. The fact that he had to do that when he called out violence on both sides says a lot more about the quote-unquote opposing side of him than majority of people would probably care to realize, considering that he called out all violence. All violence being the ones done by people that were white supremacists and the ones that were done by Antifa. It's not that difficult of a concept to wrap your head around when you think of violence based upon simply violence rather than, ideology, identity. To you, maybe Antifa can't commit an act of violence simply because, they're far leftists and leftists do nothing wrong in your eyes. Or maybe you just think that the white supremacists are the only ones doing it because of the color of their fucking skin. Irregardless of that situation, regardless of all that, the mere fact that you can't wrap your head around it is astonishing.
Do you think that neo-Nazis and white supremacists are the same as those who are protesting them?
I think it's ridiculous to have me choose between Hitler and Stalin, which is what I consider both groups are.
And why are the people who turned out to protest Nazis,
Not
why
all of
are
them.
they Stalin to you?
The Antifa group to me is totally a very Stalinish kind of group.
How so?
If you're willing to set fires and burn places to the ground, that doesn't sound like a very peaceful group to me.
But they're
both the same evil.
They didn't use those tactics in Charlottesville.
I'm going to start in this point. Other than the fact where she's obviously wrong, she starts out with saying, do you think these two groups are the same? And he replies, do you want me to choose between Hitler and Stalin? And her response is, do you mean to tell me that those people that turned out to protest Nazis are acting like Stalin? Which in of itself is a terrible argument because, there were some calm protesters on the opposing side as well. But then you could say, well, are you saying that all those people that showed up were white supremacists? Which I'm sure if you looked into it, you'd find out that, well, quite frankly, not all of them are. What she's doing is she's trying to say, you have two choices here. Either you can choose to be Nazis, or you can choose not to be. You can choose to be these Antifa members. And to be fair, this guy actually sticks to his guns pretty well and simply saying, if you choose to burn down neighborhoods, I'm going to call you out for it. And quite frankly, the fact that she's having such a hard time understanding where he's coming from is hilarious. Because he's obviously not wrong. I mean, yeah, if you choose to burn down neighborhoods and commit acts of violence regardless of your political leanings, I'm going to disagree with you. And her response is, well, they didn't burn down anything. They didn't use those tactics in Charlottesville. Well, sorry to tell you, sweetheart, but they kind of did. There was an awful lot of violence from both sides, but there was an awful lot of violence from both sides, and Antifa was one of those sides. So yeah, they did use some of those same tactics in Charlottesville, and they are just as guilty as the white supremacists. The only difference is the white supremacists don't have the media holding them up as angels. Alright, moving on.
Who were out there who were not neo-Nazis.
You believe that there were very fine people protesting?
Yes, I do.
How do you know that?
I'm only telling you from videos that I've seen that people.
But what's the source of your videos? Where are you seeing them?
Facebook. And when I tried to repost those videos, they wouldn't allow me.
Is it possible they're not credible?
Could be. But like I said, they need to investigate and find out exactly what was going on out there.
Vice did an investigation of the people who went there with a purpose to march for neo-Nazis. So let me just play a clip.
So what she's doing here, she's doing a lot of word working, manipulation, and twisting facts. She first starts out by asking, after the woman says, I had a lot of videos that I saw of people that were just, in verbatim. This isn't verbatim, obviously. I'm paraphrasing here, but she was saying that there were people there that weren't doing anything necessarily violent. That didn't seem to be like neo-Nazis. They were just, I'm assuming, probably protesting the taking down of the statue. Which, if you want the statue there for whatever reason, it's fair enough. No big deal. But and then when she says that, she asked if the videos were credible, of all things, on Facebook. No, they're not from fucking, well, some of them are, but in her case, they're probably not from a journalist that has credentials and a college degree in journalism. So they're not quote-unquote credible, but the fact of the matter is they're probably raw footage of people just walking around with their phones, and they're just like, oh, yeah, look, these are these people that are on that side that aren't, going around beating the shit out of people. So, what she said before, the questioner said, something along the lines, well, Antifa didn't use those tactics in this case, and there were some people there, that weren't part of Antifa. Oh, well, there's some people there that weren't part of the alt-right either, but you seem to so blatantly paint them with a broad brush across the entire stroke. But, moving on from that, she goes on to say that Vice did research and found out, and this research was into those people that were there to protest as Nazis. She specifically says for people that were there to protest as Nazis. After this woman was like, oh, well, there's people there that weren't. She goes, oh, well, there was people there that weren't. Yeah, we're already well aware of that fact. You don't have to keep reiterating it. I heard you the fucking first time, you idiot. But I digress. That's the point. They're trying to be like, oh, well, the Antifa's bad. But the alt-right, they're literally Satan, Hitler, half-breeds. And there's a little dosage of Super Hitler in there, too. But, moving on. Next clip.
That very fine people were in that crowd?
Not in that crew. Nope. But those crazy, I don't know what else to call them. I probably can't say it on TV. But they still had the right to say those crazy things.
I like how she said, blood and soil is, a Nazi slogan, and then goes on to ask her, so you mean to tell me that there were good people in that crowd? Of course, she was referring to the march that happened on Friday night, versus what this woman had said before about how she had saw Facebook videos of people that were at the protest that weren't doing anything violent on the side. And to prove her point, this woman shows video of not the night that the violent protests happened, but rather the night where people peacefully marched down a street and chanted these slogans. Now keep in mind, I don't agree with what they're saying at all. But much like what this woman said, I completely agree with her. This woman, her response is the best response I could ever have given to that question. And she simply said, it's their right to say these things. Like, yeah, you may disagree with it, you may find it vile, which I don't disagree with you on this fact that it's vile, but here's the difference. She's not trying to tell these people that they're not allowed to say what they want to say because what they say is vile. She disagrees with them, obviously, but she's still saying, on the other hand, it's still a right to say it. And the woman that's, the woman that's doing the interview of these people doesn't really have much to say in the way of this at all. Of course, she's not really given much of a chance because, as you soon see, if she was going to say anything, she was interrupted by the man that I do believe in this particular instance was sitting behind the woman that just responded. So, moving on into what he has to say, and I'll give my thoughts on that.
The media is not covering it. They're only focused on making neo-Nazis and white supremacists out to be Trump supporters, and they're the issue of the problem. The reality is of what Trump said is there were two sides. There are two parties that participated.
He said there was trouble on both sides. Was there not trouble on both sides? Because I saw bats on both sides.
And I'm sure you've heard the argument. There was violence on both sides of World War II also.
Yes.
But we were on the right side.
Yes.
There's a right side and a wrong side.
No, not in this case.
If there were some people in Antifa Okay, but most of them were students, including Heather.
The only thing I have to say about this particular situation is he says that the media isn't covering it. Well, the media actually did cover it. They just didn't cover it properly. But he goes on to explain the same point that more or less that I would try to say is what was happening, is they were going out of their way to try to tie these white supremacists in any way, shape, or form they could to Donald Trump. And this is the reason why when he came out and he condemned violence on both sides, they were so happy to hop onto the bandwagon of basically saying that just because he didn't call them out specifically meant that he condoned their actions. And the other guy says, he says there were problems on both sides. Were there not problems on both sides? I mean, I saw bats on both sides, and he's not wrong. Of course he's not fucking wrong. It's just that this woman is going out of her way to try to defend Antifa and say that if you don't agree with Antifa, then obviously you agree with neo-Nazis. Which, in of itself, is an idiotic argument. You should understand it's not in black and white as that. You can sit in the middle and look at both extremist groups and be like, they're both stupid for their own reasons. And it just so happens that both these groups, the reasons are kind of the same. But, that being said, it's just, it baffles me that they go out of their way to coddle these people. Then by people, I mean Antifa. And she even says, well, there were two sides on World War II as well, and we were on the right side. Well, I hate to burst your fucking bubble. This isn't a world war. We don't have a fucking dictatorship killing people on a regular basis simply based upon either their, sexuality or their religion or simply not for agreeing with the party. We have our two fringe groups. You're not dealing with a war. You're dealing with two fringe groups that are violent and are acting the same. But I shouldn't even have to say that. It should be a non-issue when you say that there were problems on both sides. And on top of that, she does this thing where she's like, oh, well, there were problems in Antifa. Okay, but most of them are students. Do you mean to tell me simply based on the fact that they were college students that they can do no wrong? Oh, excuse me, ma'am. They weren't beating those people over the head with baseball bats. They were beating them over the head with the truth stick of higher knowledge. No, they were beating people with baseball bats. End of story. I don't care if, they're college students or not. Actually, I kind of do care because I want to know what kind of education is going on inside of our college campuses now that's breeding these kinds of people that think it's okay to act like this. But that is just, in of itself, hilarious. But anyway, at the end there, she says something about Katherine Heine, which was a terrible mishap in any way, shape, or form. That somebody ended up dying because of this. Somebody ended up dying because of these two groups. And yes, I am going to blame both groups. Because even while it may have been a member of the Unite the Right and the Alt-Right that was the one that was driving behind the wheel of the vehicle, her death is going to be just a one of many if this shit continues. And the media coddling Antifa is going to empower them to do more violence, to be more violent, because they already think that they have the media on their side. Hell, they already think they have academia on their side, which in a large part they probably do. But the reality is that when a news station has such a hard time dealing with the reality that two violent groups exist, and there's evidence out there, it's not even that difficult to find. Like, you're a news website, you're supposed to report the news, and if the only thing you're trying to do is you're doing everything within your power to make it out like a certain group of people is being founded by another group, is indicative of all people that supported Trump, well then, quite frankly, this is the reason why you get called fake news. And this is the reason why nobody takes you seriously. I mean, these people on these panel have a very simplistic way of looking at it. There's problems on both sides. While the alt-right may have been, their ideas are vile and they're improper, as long as they don't act violently, their words are just words and they're allowed to say them. But I digress, and that'll do it for this video. This is my first response video, and quite frankly, I'm having one hell of a time figuring out the technology. And I'm hoping it turns out at least halfway okay, so let me know in the comments below how you feel about this and if I should do more in the future. Anyway, have a good morning, afternoon, evening, and or night, and I will see you later.